Welcome back to the Rockhounding podcast. Today we're diving deep into rock sealing.
Oh, cool.
And
Huh?
it might seem kind of mundane at first glance,
Right.
but trust me, there's way more to it than meets the eye.
Yeah, I think a lot of people kind of just assume, oh, it's just about making the rock shiny.
Right, exactly. It's about preservation too,
Uh,
and revealing some of that inner beauty.
yeah, for sure.
We'll uncover why it's not just about making your finds look pretty, but actually taking care of them and making them last.
Yeah, because rocks, they may seem all tough and permanent,
Right.
but a lot of them are actually pretty vulnerable.
Really?
Yeah, especially those porous ones.
Porous rocks. Okay, what exactly does that mean?
Well, think of it like this. It's like a porous rock, like sandstone or limestone. It's full of these tiny little holes,
Okay.
almost like a sponge, you know?
Oh, I see.
And just like a sponge, it can soak up liquids and other stuff from its surroundings.
Interesting. So it doesn't sound so good for the rock long term.
Not really, no.
So why should we care if our rock's porous?
Well, over time, all that stuff that gets absorbed, it can cause staining and discoloration.
Oh,
It
yeah.
can even weaken the rock itself.
Wow, I never thought about that. So that's where sealing comes in,
Exactly.
like a shield, right?
Yeah, sealing basically creates this barrier over all those tiny pores,
Okay.
so it stops the bad stuff from getting in and causing damage.
Cool. So it's like giving it a raincoat, basically.
Pretty much, yeah, to protect it from the elements
Yeah.
and keep it looking its best.
Makes perfect sense. So we're talking more than just rain and dirt.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I read that even air pollution can mess with certain rocks.
That's true. You wouldn't think it, but those pollutants in the air, they can actually react with the minerals in some rocks.
Really?
Yeah, it's crazy. They can make them deteriorate or like change color over time.
Wow, it's like rocks are way more sensitive than I realized.
They are in a way, yeah.
So sealing helps prevent that, keeps our treasures looking good,
Ex
even in not so great environments.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so we got the protection part down.
Mm.
But what about enhancing a rock's beauty through sealing? How does that even work?
Well, for some rocks, sealing kind of brings out their hidden potential, you know?
Yeah.
Like take agates, for example. Sealing can make those colors just, wow, so much more vibrant.
Yeah, I've seen some amazing pictures online. Those agates, they practically glow.
Right.
Is it just color, or can sealing affect other things too?
Oh, it can do a lot more than just enhance color. For rocks with, say, a rough texture, sealing can give them a smooth, almost polished look.
Oh, interesting.
It can also highlight cool features like veins of minerals or fossil inclusions.
Ooh, cool. Making them really stand out.
Yeah, it's like taking something that's already pretty awesome and just giving it that extra wow factor, you know?
I love that. Now, I know some rockhounds are all about the natural look. So is there ever a time when you wouldn't seal a rock?
That's a really good question. And yeah, it's important to remember that sealing isn't always the answer. For example, if you've got a rock that already has a beautiful natural polish,
Right.
sealing, it could actually make it look worse, you know?
Oh, really? How so?
It can kind of dull it down, make it look artificial almost.
So it's about knowing when to enhance and when to let the natural beauty shine through.
Yeah, exactly.
Are there other times when you wouldn't seal?
There are a few, yeah. Like, if you think a rock might be scientifically important, you know? Like a fossil or a unique mineral,
Right, yeah.
it's best to check with an expert first.
Oh, that makes sense.
Because sealing could mess with any future research.
Yeah, you don't want to accidentally damage a piece of history.
Exactly.
And speaking of sharing discoveries, if you're loving this deep dive into rock sealing, be sure to check out the Rockhounding Podcast Facebook group.
It's a great place to connect with other rockhounds.
Yeah, you can share your finds, ask questions, all that good stuff. You'll find the link in the description. It's a fantastic community for both beginners and experienced rockhounds.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so we've covered the why of rock sealing. But what about the how? What are the actual steps involved? How do we actually seal a rock?
Well, the first and most important step is preparation. Before you even think about sealant,
Okay.
you got to make sure your rock is totally clean.
So we're talking dirt, dust, all that gone.
Yeah, everything. Even tiny bits of stuff can mess with how well the sealant sticks.
Oh, okay.
It can lead to uneven coverage or even peeling later on.
Oh, no, we don't want that.
So we got to make sure those rocks are squeaky clean.
All right, so how do we get them that clean? Just soap and water? Or do we need something stronger?
For most rocks, a good scrub with a soft brush,
Okay.
some mild soap and water should do the trick.
All right, keeping it simple.
The key is to be gentle. you know?
Yeah.
We want to get the dirt off, but we don't want to mess up the rock's surface.
Right, makes sense.
Once it's all scrubbed, make sure it's completely dry.
Okay, so clean and dry, got it. Now comes the fun part, I guess, choosing the sealant.
Yeah.
I know there's like a million options.
Ugh.
What are some of the things we need to think about?
Well, first off, think about the finish you want.
Oh, okay.
Do you want it glossy and shiny? Or more of a natural matte look?
I guess it depends on the rock, right?
Uh-huh.
Like for an agate, I might want it glossy.
To really make those colors pop?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But for petrified wood, maybe matte would be better.
Yeah, you want to keep that natural texture.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's about matching the sealant to the rock and the look you're going for. Another thing to think about is durability.
Oh, right.
If it's going to be outside, you'll need something that can handle the elements.
So something tougher than just
Right.
like regular craft store sealant.
Right. For outdoor use, you might want to go with an epoxy resin.
Epoxy resin.
It creates a much harder, more durable layer of protection.
So it can handle rain and sun, all that.
Yeah, even frost.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. What about those matte sealants?
They can be pretty durable, too.
Oh, okay.
It really depends on the specific product.
Mm-hmm.
There are some great matte sealants made for outdoor use.
So you don't have to sacrifice durability for that natural look.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got glossy, matte, and epoxy. Is that pretty much it? Or are there like other weirder ones out there?
Those are the most common ones, but there are some specialty sealants, too.
Specialty sealants.
Like for specific types of rocks, for example, there are sealants that enhance the color of certain minerals,
Ooh, cool.
or ones specifically for fossils.
Wow, it's amazing how much goes into this.
Yeah.
All right, so once we've picked our sealant, how do we actually apply it?
The key is to apply thin, even coats.
Thin and even, okay?
No matter what type of sealant you're using, you don't want to just glob it on.
Okay,
That can cause drips and make it dry unevenly.
gotcha. So patience is key here.
Definitely, it's better to apply multiple thin coats and let each one dry completely
Okay,
before adding the next one.
then to try and do it all at once.
Right.
So no rush in the process. Once we've got it all on,
Yeah.
is there anything else we need to do?
Most sealants have a curing time,
Oh, right, curing time.
which is basically how long it takes to fully harden. You'll usually find that info on the product instructions.
Yeah, okay.
Make sure you let your rocks cure undisturbed for the recommended time.
And what happens if we don't let it cure properly?
Well, the sealant might not fully harden, so it won't be as good at protecting the rock.
Oh, okay.
It could also stay sticky and
Yeah.
attract dust and stuff.
Yeah, no, that's definitely not the look we're going for.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk more about the rocks that really need sealing. You mentioned sandstone and limestone.
Yeah, those are super porous, which means they've got tons of those tiny spaces.
Right, like we talked about earlier,
And those spaces can absorb all kinds of stuff.
which can lead to staining and all that.
Exactly, and even erosion over time.
And sealing helps stop that from happening.
It's like giving those rocks a protective shell.
So they stay beautiful for longer.
Exactly.
What about other types of rocks? Are there any that you'd always recommend sealing?
Generally, any rock that's porous or tends to crumble or break down,
Okay.
those can benefit from sealing.
So like shale and chalk,
Yep, those are good examples.
and even some fossils.
Sometimes, yeah.
And on the other hand, are there any rocks that are like basically sealant proof?
Rocks that are really hard and not porous, like quartz or granite,
Okay.
those usually don't need to be sealed.
Because they're already pretty tough.
Right, they can handle weathering pretty well on their own.
So it's all about assessing the individual rock
Hmm.
and deciding if sealing will actually help.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it.
What about those colorful rocks, like those agates we talked about?
Sealing can definitely make those colors even more vibrant, but it's not always totally necessary.
Oh.
Some agates are naturally glossy, and their colors already look great.
So sealing might actually make them duller in that case. Interesting. So it's always good to experiment.
Yeah. See what works best for each rock.
And remember, if you're not sure about a particular rock, you can always ask for advice
Uh-huh.
in the Rockhounding Podcast Facebook group.
It's a great resource for that kind of thing.
You can find the link in the description. Now let's move on to some specific techniques for applying sealant.
Sounds good.
Are there any, like, tips or tricks that can help us get that perfect finish?
Definitely. One important thing is to work in a well-ventilated area.
Right, especially with those spray sealants.
Exactly. Safety first.
So what about the actual application?
One tip is to use a turntable.
A turntable, like for records.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, cool. How does that work?
You put your rock on the turntable,
Okay.
and then you can rotate it as you apply the sealant.
Oh, I get it.
That way you get even coverage, and it helps prevent drips.
That's a great idea.
Another tip is to use a thin brush
Okay.
or a foam applicator.
To apply the sealant.
Yeah, it gives you more control and helps prevent streaks and bubbles.
So it's all about precision and taking your time.
Pretty much, yeah.
What about those hard-to-reach spots? Like little crevices or details?
For those, you can use a toothpick
Okay.
or a small fine-tipped brush.
To carefully apply the sealant. Those are some great tips, thanks.
You're welcome.
So it sounds like successful rock sealing is all about the right sealant, careful application, and a good dose of patience. It definitely does sound like a process that needs a careful touch. Now, I know we've sort of touched on this already, but let's dig a little deeper into the different types of sealants.
Okay, sure.
I think a lot of our listeners are probably wondering, okay, I've got this awesome rock. Which sealant should I use?
Right, yeah, that's the big question.
And like we said, there's no one right answer.
It really depends on the rock, the finish you want, and where it's going to be sprayed.
Okay, so let's start with those clear acrylic sprays. They seem pretty popular, especially for beginners.
Yeah, for sure.
What are the pros and cons?
Well, acrylic sprays are great for a lot of reasons. They're easy to use, pretty cheap, and you can find them everywhere.
Right.
They also dry pretty quickly, which is always nice.
And they give that classic glossy finish that really makes the colors pop.
Exactly.
Right. So like agates, jaspers, even some polished petrified wood.
Yeah, those would all look good with a glossy finish.
They're also good for rocks that'll be kept inside, right?
Right, where they won't be exposed to the weather.
Yeah, makes sense.
But they're not as tough as some other sealants, so they might not be the best choice for rocks that'll be handled a lot.
Okay. Or for outdoor use.
Right.
So if we're talking outdoor rocks, or rocks that need some serious protection, we'd probably want to go with an epoxy resin.
Yeah, epoxy resins are kind of like the heavy-duty champions of sealants. They create a super strong, durable, waterproof barrier.
Wow, so they could really take a beating.
Pretty much, yeah. They can handle almost anything.
So like garden paths,
Uh-huh.
rock sculptures, stuff like that.
Yeah, anything that's going to be outside.
They're also good for rocks that might scratch or chip easily.
Exactly. They add an extra layer of protection.
But they are a bit trickier to use than acrylic sprays, right?
Yeah, they can be a bit more challenging.
How so?
They're thicker, you have to mix them carefully,
Okay.
and they take longer to cure.
And I'm guessing ventilation is super important with epoxy
Oh, yeah, definitely.
because of the fumes.
Always work in a well-ventilated area when you're using epoxy.
Good point. Safety first.
And wear gloves to protect your skin.
All right, so we've got the glossy acrylics and the heavy-duty epoxies. Now, what about those matte sealants?
Matte sealants are perfect when you want to keep that natural look, but still protect the rock.
Oh.
They're really good for rocks with a rough texture, like sandstone or petrified wood.
Where a glossy finish would look kind of weird?
Yeah, exactly.
So they're all about that earthy vibe.
Right.
And there are matte sealants made for outdoor use too, right?
Yep, you don't have to sacrifice durability for that natural look.
That's awesome. It sounds like there's a sealant for every situation. Now, before we finish up, I want to talk about safety.
Yeah, safety is super important.
We've mentioned ventilation, especially with epoxy. Any other safety tips
Always wear gloves when you're working with sealants.
to protect your skin?
Yeah, right. And if you're using a spray sealant, wear a mask so you don't breathe in the fumes.
Good point.
And it's a good idea to wear eye protection, too.
Yeah, safety glasses are always a good idea.
Just in case.
And always work in a well-lit area.
Definitely.
If you have any questions, check the product instructions. Or ask a more experienced rockhound.
Yeah, that's always a good idea.
Better safe than sorry.
Exactly.
And of course, if you're looking for a supportive community to share your rockhounding adventures, check out the Rockhounding Podcast Facebook group.
It's a great place to connect with other rockhounds.
You'll find the link in the description. It's been great diving into the world of rock sealing with you.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Thanks for sharing your expertise.
You're welcome.
I think we've all learned a lot about how to protect and preserve our rockhounding finds. To all our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Happy rockhounding, everyone, and we'll see you next time on the Rockhounding Podcast.